welcome to a special live edition of On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel, here to talk about the breaking news that just went down a few minutes ago. Carthage running back KJ Edwards off the board, headed to Texas A&M, was scheduled to make a visit to Texas this weekend. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. And CJ, it's funny, we recorded the recruiting breakdown earlier today, and we ended on, hey, which position group really needs something to go their way? And you and Jerry both ended on running back because, hey, if for whatever reason Texas misses out on KJ Edwards and Xavier Crowell, Chad Scott's essentially starting from scratch. Well, I can't imagine this is going to be the end of their pursuit for KJ Edwards, and Xavier Crowell still has a decision to make. But CJ, they're pretty close to having to start from scratch after this decision by KJ Edwards today.
Yeah, they pretty much are, and I say that because, look, they're still in the hunt for an Xavier Crowell, but we know that it's going to be very difficult to overcome the push of an Alabama or an Auburn, two in-state schools for Crowell, who are making it very difficult, as we've talked about in previous cycles, to leave the state of Alabama. So right now, look, you were scheduled to have two guys, more or less, on campus at the running back position for official visits, right? Xavier Crowell comes to Texas June 6th. We talk about it. He's visiting Alabama this weekend. Decision coming June 26th. Well, the only other running back that you were expected to host this month of June was KJ Edwards, who just made his decision to Texas A&M. So, to your point, Jeff, and this kind of goes back to what we saw with defensive line recruiting a year ago, Texas has to go back to the well. They have to cast a wider net. They have to get more guys on campus. This, without a question of a doubt, a pretty significant blow to what Texas hoped and really scouted to be their 2026 recruiting running back picture. So right now, Texas still in the hunt for a running back target and really for another guy to get on campus for an official visit.
I'm glad you brought that up because the similarities are very eerie. You look at D-line recruiting a year ago. Yeah, had Bo Davis leave for the LSU job in February. You hire Kenny Baker, and he's trying to do things on the fly. And then you have that run where Myron Charles is headed elsewhere. Josiah Sharma's headed elsewhere. It's not looking good. Things eventually got turned around. You have almost the exact same thing play out this year. Tashard Choice heads to the NFL. You got Chad Scott coming in. He actually got Texas back in the mix with Xavier Crowell, got Texas kind of in it with Derek Cooper, at least got Texas to the table. And KJ Edwards has been the guy in state, at least emerged as a guy in state once it looked like Javian Osborne was headed elsewhere. But now it looks like, CJ, he's either going to have to try to really work from behind to flip somebody or, like you said, start that board over from scratch. It's not the end of the world, but at the same time, you can't really sugarcoat how big of a loss this is right now.
Yeah, it feels significant again, and it is significant for Texas. And more so, it feels like Texas probably should have played it safe, maybe brought in a few other running back prospects. Of course, Amari Latimer was a name, Sandy Creek out of Mississippi. Texas was in on early, and then he's taking an official visit to Georgia Tech last weekend, taking one to Georgia next weekend. Actually has some crystal balls right now to Wisconsin. So, look, Texas needs to continue to cast that wider net, and still there's no official visit for Derek Cooper out of Chaminade out in Florida. But, Jeff, we talk about it because Texas has been able to benefit from the talent in state and then go out and poach from the out of state. Well, look, Javian Osborne's committed to Oregon. KJ Edwards now committed to Texas A&M. Texas A&M also has Jonathan Hatton out of Cibolo Steel down in the San Antonio area. Look, it's not a great in-state crop of running backs, and that's where things get a little bit difficult for the Texas staff in 26 is normally you miss on your out-of-state guys and you're able to run back to the in-state. Well, when you miss on the out-of-state guys and now the in-state guys are committing elsewhere, now you're really slim pickings. And then, again, Texas will find a talented running back. They will. It's Texas. It's running backs. They go synonymously hand in hand, right? So I'm not to say that this is the end of the cycle. We're in June, and we've heard the same spiel from Steve Sarkisian last year saying, hey, it's June and July. Who cares, right? Talk to me in December. But point being, that picture for the running back room, that running back big board, it's looking pretty bare at the moment.
Yeah, if you look at what's on campus too, like if you just take a big picture look at the running back room. Thank you, Joe Z. CJ, are you ready to hold Joe Z since it looks like July 4th, 2024 is coming early in 2025?
And F for fake, you're absolutely right. Tre'Davious Ball is committed to Oregon. Javian Osborne committed to Notre Dame. Now Edwards to A&M, obviously. You get what I'm saying. It's not a great in-state crop this year, and that's really where you start to see that board dwindle in terms of numbers, in terms of guys on campus. Texas didn't take a lot of interest from in-state guys building up to this point in the cycle, and I mean that from recruiting them as sophomores and juniors a year ago. So we'll see, but right now I really wonder where they go from here.
I mean, you have to think, and granted, this exercise and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. If Tashard Choice is still the running backs coach at Texas, CJ, they probably got their 2 backs right now and are done. And he's looking ahead to 2027.
Yeah, they absolutely. I think they are, and I think you do it out of look. I think you have a Javian Osborne in the class. I think that you probably have a KJ Edwards in the class. If not, you have Amari Latimer, who was very high on the Longhorns. And again, things were moving in the right direction for Derek Cooper out of Chaminade Madonna, as I mentioned earlier. And look, it's a tough spot for Chad Scott to step into. Let's not sugarcoat that as well. And we talked about it with Kenny Baker last year. We talked about it with Chris Jackson coming in and recruiting wide receiver. Look, it's not an easy thing to do when you're recruiting Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia, Oregon, all these big programs who have continued to recruit and establish those relationships over a long period of time. So Texas is in a tough spot, but again, it is Texas and it is running backs. They'll find someone that is pretty talented to figure out this class.
It just shows you that, we talk about NIL and everything else in recruiting right now. I mean, relationships matter, and it's nothing against Chad Scott. It's just you're really in a time crunch when you come into the job as late as he did. I mean, you're already past junior days. I mean, you're pretty well down the road for your 26 class. It's not a great situation to be in. Made the most of it. Looked like Texas was turning some things around. Now, again, you just got to start over. Anybody tuning in, we're covering the breaking news. KJ Edwards, the talented running back out of Carthage, committed to Texas A&M today. CJ, that's a couple of big-time prospects that have committed to the Aggies in the last couple of days. And the two situations really aren't anything alike. You've got KJ Edwards. This was probably going to end up being a Texas A&M battle. The Aggies went out. Samuel Roseboro, Texas is just trying to work with numbers on the offensive line right now. And I think Jerry did a great job of breaking it down. Hey, if all things were equal, it would be Texas for Samuel Roseboro. All things were not equal. The NIL offer looked like it was more prominent from the Aggies. So, hey, Texas A&M got them a really good offensive lineman. Unlike offensive line, though, where Texas still can go to the well, you've still got Zayden Crimpin coming off of a visit. Felix Ojo coming off a visit. You've got John Turntine coming in this weekend. You got plenty of options. Kyle Fletzel's a really big margin for error to build him a great offensive line class. And I don't say that facetiously. I mean a great offensive line haul is what Texas can have in 2026. Chad Scott, not so much. CJ Bernhorn Horn mentions this as Crowell's offer just increased substantially. What do you do if you're Texas for Xavier Crowell? I mean, I'm not a fan of just throwing NIL dollars at a problem just to make sure that you've got a back, but the relationship has to be there. Do you do anything extra at this point, or do you feel like, hey, you've done all you could, just see where you come out when he makes the decision on the 26th?
To me, that feels like a panic move, and that's not been like Texas. We've seen Texas go out and kind of stick to their plan, right? Late flips and cycles. Who knows what coaching staff might open up? Who knows what this season might entail? If you're Texas, I think it's more of a bet on yourself, and you bet on the roster that you've constructed to go out there, prove on the field that you are once again going to be a team that competes year in, year out for the college football playoff and beyond. So I don't like taking what you would think of as allotted cash for one position, allotted cash for another, missing out on one and just throwing it all at another player. That feels like throwing Flex Seal on, the Grand Canyon, right? That's not necessarily the approach that I would take. What's interesting, though, is you do have to continue through the whistle. And if you're Texas, if you're able to go out there and showcase another year of Trey Wisener, another year of Jarrett Gibson, and now the emergence of a Christian Clark's or a James Simon. Hey, that's a healthy group. Very early on, you can prove that, hey, you can come in and play immediately at the running back. And running back at Texas, more times than not, household name across the country. So they're going to be able to find guys. What's going to be really interesting for me is, look, you've offered 12 running backs in the 2026 cycle. Only 4 of them are uncommitted right now. If I'm Texas, I'm going out down the list, and I've got to find a way to get somebody else on campus or at least extend a few more offers. Those 4 uncommitted guys at the moment: Savion Hyder, who's down to Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Derek Cooper, who we mentioned, Texas is on him more so than Hyder at the moment. And then you go down the list: Xavier Crowell, who I mentioned will be at Alabama this weekend. It feels like the Tide are the team to beat in that recruitment at the moment. And then Amari Latimer, who Texas was in on. He visited early on last year as well. Has yet to really find that connection into the summer. So far, no official visits for Latimer. He's going to Georgia this weekend, was at Georgia Tech last weekend as well. So right now, it feels completely brand new in terms of where they head from here, Jeff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Looking in the chat, and again, thanks everybody for tuning in and participating in the chat as always. Money Rain TK says, I don't get it. A&M already has Hatton committed. Why does KJ join them? I think there's a couple of reasons why you do it. First of all, KJ Edwards is a hell of a player. And we saw this when Texas got Keontae Ingram, even though, Keontae Ingram didn't finish his career at Texas. He went to SC because, I think Texas ended up fine with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson in the backfield. But Keontae Ingram was ready to go right away from a football IQ standpoint, understanding the game, feel for the game, physically needed to put some armor on his body. But, man, you playing Scott Surratt's offense. It's a pro-style offense. You're going to understand protections. You're going to understand the pass game. If you play running back at Carthage, you're going to be ready to go right away. And I think, CJ, you look back at the end of last year, I think what Texas did and what Texas A&M didn't do, and granted, it was Mike Elko's first year, so you could only do so much with the roster in the time you had. But you look at Texas withstood Jonathan Brooks leaving early for the NFL, C.J. Baxter getting hurt in the preseason, and Trey Wisner had a 1,000-yard season and carried Texas to a win in that game against Texas A&M. Look at the A&M situation. A&M had a deep backfield, but you lose Ruben Owens to an injury. When they lost Le'Veon Moss, their entire offense changed. Now, Maury Daniels did what he could, but you basically ran out of running back. So I think this is A&M saying, I think it's Trooper Taylor and Mike Elko and that staff saying, look, we're not going to get ourselves in a position again where our offense is just going to crumble because we ran out of running backs.
Yeah.
Texas in a position now where, man, if Texas starts running out of available running backs, CJ, then it's some string of bad luck happened that you just can't foresee happening. That wasn't the case with A&M last year.
Yeah, and look, I know that there's a question. Look, you have Jonathan Hatton. Why do you, if you're, KJ Edwards, why do you join that class? Well, they're 2 completely different backs. Hatton in person, probably closer to 6'2.5" than what you would think of as a 6'1" big running back. He's a big body right there. He's a short down and distance guy. And then Edwards, as we've talked about throughout the cycle, quick, elusive, kind of lightning in a bottle back, right? One cut and go can make you miss on the hole. 2 completely different makes and builds right there at the running back position. So it makes sense. And Texas has tried to combine that same pairing, right, with a C.J. Baxter, Trey Wisner, obviously taking the 2 backs. And that was another thing, Jeff, is with Edwards off the board now, for now, again, we do think that this will be one that Texas battles through all the way to signing day. With Texas's recent run of 2 backs in the class, where does that remain the case for 2026? Because, again, we just ran through the list. There aren't many offers at the moment in which Texas has, outstanding to kids who are uncommitted. I do wonder if they just go 1 kid this year and maybe perhaps portal heavy emphasis moving forward as well.
Yeah, it's hard to say because we saw this last year with defensive line. What I think I feel like we can guarantee right now, Steve Sarkisian and Chad Scott, they're not going to panic. I think that's the worst thing you can do is say, we have to get 2 backs. That's how you end up with somebody on scholarship that you realize not very long after they get to campus, like, oh, man, I don't know if this guy can play for us. and then you realize maybe you just wasted a scholarship. And now, especially when you're going to 105, you can't afford to waste those scholarships. All those guys that are on scholarship have to be able to play for you. So I think that's part of it. It's just I don't expect them to panic, and you can't panic. It may be a one running back class. It may be a class, and the portal is interesting too, CJ, because you can think, hey, let's go get a running back out of the portal. But when you first off, with all the legislation out there and the lawyers lawyering, we don't know when the next portal window is going to be open. We assume it's going to be in December, but it may be after that. We don't know at this point. But there may not be a running back that you like in the portal or that's a fit in the portal. So I just think you've got to stick to your guns. Look, that's what got Texas to this point, is them being really thorough in their evaluations, finding blue chip players that fit. This is not the time to start going against that, and I don't expect them to. CJ, as we start winding it down, I want to get to Tracy Jackson 23's question, which is probably what a lot of Longhorn fans are wondering. What other backs are out there uncommitted?
Well, that's a great question, because on the in-state, I mentioned it's not a deep class. And I talked to a few college coaches while I was out on the road in the spring who said, look, the trickle-down effect is affecting, your Texas Techs, your Baylors, your Houstons, your SMUs, right? With a lot of these top-end backs in the state going to Oregon, going to Notre Dame, that next group of regional schools have to pick from the region. And it kind of uplifts that level of running back that otherwise probably would have been at a level below, if that makes sense. So right now, one of the hot names on the street is Jet Walker out of Georgetown, 5'11" running back. Look, he puts up some gaudy numbers over at Georgetown. Is he a fit for Texas? That remains to be seen. I've yet to hear the two have any sort of connection in the past. But look, point being, if you're Texas, you kind of have to reevaluate everything at the moment. So look, we'll see, of course. And again, I don't want to say it's a complete panic moment for the Longhorns. It's a significant loss on the trail, but we've seen significant losses on the trail. And Texas has finished as a top 5 recruiting team over the last 5 years. So they're going to be fine. It just might take a minute before this picture has a clear view.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, Jet Walker out of Georgetown, like you said, CJ, committed to West Virginia right now. So, and you got to think too, that's a West Virginia program. Rich Rodriguez is back, so it's not the Dana definitely not the Dana Holgerson spread, and it's not even the Neil Brown power spread. You're going to, or a hybrid spread. You're going back to more of that power spread run game with Rich Rodriguez. They came down to Texas and got Jet Walker. Over 2,300, almost 2,400 yards, 37 touchdowns last year, 10.8, almost 11 yards per carry as a junior. I don't care what level of Texas high school football you're playing. You put up those kind of numbers, that means something. I do think Tucker Foster, thank you for the super chat, says, I have confidence in Sark and this staff to find a senior riser or flip someone. The thing that clouds it for me with KJ Edwards, CJ, is typically, Scott Surratt. Look, he's got enough state championships to give rings away and still have plenty for one hand. Typically when his guys make a commitment, they stick with it. They don't flip. Very rarely are you going to see a Carthage kid commit somewhere and then flip. Usually when they make that commitment, they're done. They'll make it at the start of the season or before the start of the season so they can focus on winning yet another state championship. So that's kind of where my hesitation is with KJ Edwards now that he's committed to Texas A&M. But, yeah, I mean, you have no choice really but to trust Chad Scott and Sark that they'll find someone. And CJ, typically running back's one of those positions where if there's going to be a senior riser in the state of Texas, it's probably going to be somebody at that running back position. But I would expect them to keep evaluating guys throughout the Southeast. Look, maybe it ends up being Amari Latimer or one of these guys that they've evaluated already and offered that ends up being available at some point, or they feel like they can flip. I don't know. Just to wait and see. But right now it stings, but not the end of the world. Just probably got to exercise some patience and see where the staff goes from here.
Yeah, 2 other names, Carday Mack out of Atascocita, currently committed to Arizona State, and Christian Rhodes out of Lake Highlands, currently committed to SMU. Those are really that next group of in-state guys who are committed at the moment, but hey, below your Tredarian Balls, your Javian Osborns, your KJ Edwards, those are the next crop of in-state guys that are maybe within reach for the Longhorns as they reevaluate. Also, we do not expect KJ Edwards to make it into campus this weekend. That, of course, comes off the heels of the commitment that we just broke down with him committing to Texas A&M. So, hey, a lot to go or a long way to go in this 2026 cycle. And for the Texas running back position, a lot to figure out as we move forward with July creeping up in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, you look at the talent on campus, you've got CJ Baxter and Trey Wisner as juniors. You've got Jarrett Gibson coming off of a freshman year where he learned a lot. We'll see what kind of strides he makes. You got Christian Clark coming off the injury. You've got the two young kids, James Simon and Ricky Stewart. So you've got 6 running backs on the depth chart right now. Only 2 of them are draft eligible, CJ Baxter and Trey Wisner. But it hurts when you start thinking about 2026, but then you come back to it, CJ, start thinking about 2025 and realize, all right, yeah, Texas has plenty of ammo at running back to go compete in the SEC and go win a championship. And maybe, I don't know, maybe if Baxter and or Wisner have big years and looks like maybe they're headed off to the next level, maybe that gets somebody in the fold. But, hey, somebody said, I apologize, whoever said it earlier in the chat. I can't find it right now, but forgive me. Basically, Kenny Baker last year rubbed a lot of people the wrong way as far as his hire to replace Bo Davis. Rubbed a lot of people the wrong way until he didn't. So I don't think this is a reason to lose faith in Chad Scott. It's a long way to go until December. So we'll see how does. Jay Lee with the super chat. Thank you so much. How is A&M getting these guys over us? CJ, you want to take a stab at that one?
Look, A&M, there's a lot to like. I know Texas fans won't enjoy hearing that, but look, SEC school, one of the big programs in the state and the region, they've had a great, start to the Elko era. I know that there's a lot of expectations there. So we'll see. Of course, NIL plays a factor in all of these recruitments. So you can't just point to that and blame that or credit that to one recruiting win or the other. But look, sometimes you just have a longer relationship with another. So with another staff. But right now, Texas on to the next. We'll see where they end up.
Yeah, we recruited the recruiting breakdown. Obviously, the running back conversation at the end played out right not long after we recorded that today, but still breakdown everything going on in recruiting right now. A little preview at the upcoming visit weekend. Tonight, myself, Aaron Hogan, and Rod Babers will be live at 7:15 for the Tuesday night live stream. You got coffee and football in the morning, and then tomorrow night it's myself, CJ, and Rod on the Wednesday night live stream. So plenty of time for your super chats and your questions. Plenty of information here on the channel, plenty of information and discussion over at OnTexasFootball.com. By the way, if you're not a member over at OnTexasFootball.com, get over there right now. Use the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at OnTexasFootball.com for $39.95. So we'll have you covered on the site, here on the channel, all the latest developments on recruiting in general and that running back picture and where it goes from here. For CJ Vogel, for Matthew behind the scenes, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you for listening and watching, and until next time, hook 'em.